Um, my name is Ian McArthur, and the past president of BMN here. So, so this presentation is over trips from 2022 to this year, mainly this year. 6 trips up Pitt Lake in the last couple of years, and so the main reason that this all started was Mark Haddock, who was one of the founding members of BMN, bought himself a boat a couple of years ago and decided to do more exploring on Pitt Lake. And what he came to the idea was that what Pitt Lake needed was some side trails going to waterfalls, viewpoints, lakes. He was involved, I guess he was actually the project manager of putting in the campsites on Pitt Lake that he wanted some trails to go from. So he did that in 1996 through BC Parks and Catesy First Nation. So he's been going up Pitt Lake for an awfully long time. I was hoping that he would be on the call here tonight, but he's not available. Um, but um, but yeah, so that was one of the main reasons we started going up and investigating different places along Pitt Lake. And Pitt Lake is one of the largest tidal lakes in the world. So I will just start with land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Burke Mountain Naturalists conduct our meetings and activities on the unceded core traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, as well as the shared traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Catesy, Musqueam, and Squamish First Nations. We thank the people who continue to live on these lands and care for them. So I think I'll just jump right into the presentation, and if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to ask. And for the people that were on trips with me, if you have any comments about the trips, please add into it. So. Oh, I want to do that.
Ian, while you're preparing, just how long, you said it's the longest tidal lake. How long is it?
Okay, Pitt Lake is, if you go from the tip to Grant Narrows, it's 22 kilometers. But if you travel by boat, it's about 26 kilometers. Okay, so just a photo of Pitt Lake here. And so for the people that aren't familiar where Pitt Lake is, Coquitlam's down here, Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, and in Pitt Meadows is how you access Grant Narrows in this area here. Can everybody see my little cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I can probably go to see if is that any more color. No, that's even smaller. Okay. But yeah, so Grant Narrows is in approximately this area here. And this is the Pitt Lake going up here. So some of the places we'll talk about, Raven Creek, Defrauder Creek, and Osprey Creek. And then DeBeck Creek is kind of off in this area here. So some of the campsites we have down here, we have Raven Creek. We'll talk about Dark Creek. We'll show some pictures of the pictographs, Defrauder Creek, and Osprey Creek, which is way up on the top here, and then DeBeck Creek is off the map on the left-hand side or the west side. So first start with a trip to DeBeck Creek in 2022. It was in late September. So again, Grant Narrows is down here. So we traveled by boat all the way up Pitt Lake up to DeBeck Creek, which is somewhere in the round of the area of 20 to 22 kilometers. And this is the mouth of DeBeck Creek here. And on this particular trip, we went up the old road that goes up DeBeck Creek, and we went to a waterfall, and then up this trail here, or old trail anyways, that was put in 93 and 94, going over to the Widgeon Valley. So I was a part of that as well. So this is where you start is at Grant Narrows. And I guess I was getting a little excited. I already had the oar out and I was ready to go, but we had to get the boat in the water first. And if you're going along Pitt Lake, there's many, many cabins or houses along the way. At one time, they were quite small, more like cottages, and now they've become quite large houses in quite a few areas. So this is looking up towards Osprey Peak. From many places in the Tri-Cities, you can see this little horn here. If you're looking up and towards the Pitt Lake area, and that's not the summit of Osprey, but this is the true summit of Osprey. But the horn, for whatever reason, you see quite easier than the actual summit of Osprey. So this is getting towards the head of the lake. The head of the lake is over here, and Debec Creek is over to the left. Again, that's the head of the lake. And now that's closing in on Debec Creek. So this little sort of gully spot in here, that's where the water from Debec Valley flows out of. It's fairly steep at the bottom end, but once you get past that, the valley is actually quite flat. I've walked the entire valley up into the Bull Valley, I think 4 times. And that's a closer view of the beach area of Debec Creek. And that's where the water from Debec Creek flows out. Now, just try and remember the level of Debec Creek, because near the end of the presentation, I'll be showing how high this creek was when I had to cross it in September of this year. So as I mentioned, Pitt Lake is tidal, and we should have known better than pulling up the boat like this. But I think we were assuming that the tide was coming in. But you'll see what happened when we tried to leave in a few minutes.
Ian,
Yes.
would you mind saying who was on this trip and perhaps
Oh,
the other
sure.
trip you go?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So this trip in September of 2022 was Mark Haddock. Mark Haddock was on all the trips because it was his boat, and Dean was the other person joining us for this trip. So on this trip, I hadn't been into this area, I think, in over 20 years. And so it was a bit of a mystery to try and find the old road. So we did find the old road and hiked up, and it actually, surprisingly, it was still actually in pretty good condition. And one of our main goals for the day was to get to the famous Debec waterfalls. So we got to this waterfall, which is Debec Falls, but it's a little confusing in that I've been there many times, and sometimes you see a single waterfall, and other times you see a double waterfall. So it's a matter of hiking down from the logging road and finding the right ridge to take you down to a viewpoint of the falls. But I've now figured that out, so now I know what the best views are of looking at Debec Falls. So you'll see some photos from the next trip that will show it as a double falls. It's still a pretty nice waterfall. In that area, there's a very large, I would call it an old growth Douglas fir. I remember seeing it in 1993 when I was in there. And because it's always been difficult to find the way down to the waterfalls, you can hear it from the road, but it's trying to figure out how to get down to it. So I took up some little signs with me, the old hiker sign and a couple of signs. So now I know where to leave the road to go down. So that's Mark Haddock on the left that owns the boat, and Dean on the right. And a little further up the trail, I was extremely happy to find this Debec Valley sign. That sign was put up in about 1994, and that's the intersection where the trail goes over to the Widgeon Valley. So I couldn't have been more happy when I found that sign still being up. So on this particular trip, we did head up towards the Widgeon Valley a short distance. So just a close up of the sign. It's still doing pretty good. And put up some extra little markers there showing people which direction to go. So right across the old road from there is the trail. Still has the old orange markers that were put up somewhere in about 94. They're a little farther apart now. Some of the trees have fallen down and some of the markers have got twisted over, but we're still able to find it. I remember this bridge, or wasn't really a bridge. Somebody decided that there was this little gully and they wanted to put a bridge across, but it never got finished. And Dean is standing on it, but I wouldn't walk across it the way it is now. Those trees have rotted quite a bit in the 30 years that they've been down. So we got up the trail probably about half an hour or so, and so we put up a sign just saying that this was kind of as far as we got in 2022, and put up one of the hiker signs. So this is in showing sort of when we went back, which we did this year, we'd find where we left it off from the previous year. So when we got back down to the boat, it wasn't in water anymore. So we had to use some logs to put the boat up on some logs, and then once we got it on the logs, it slid not too badly, and we got her into the water. And we had some extra time on hand, and Mark was really keen on showing us some of the campsites on the same day. So we went over to Osprey Creek North and South. So these are campsites that Mark was a project manager on in 1996. And I'd never been to these campsites before. So there were some people camping there, which was great. And this time we made sure that we put the boat and kept it in the water using an anchor. And the mountains in the background, those are the Five Fingers, and that's the Quebec Valley that's going up there. So that's the valley that we just come back from. And again, just showing the beach area by Osprey Creek North, and with the Five Fingers in the background. And just a close up. And so we took a little walk. It was amazing what was there. You know, it's like a lawn, and no one comes in and mows it or anything. I guess it just doesn't grow too high. Lots of places to camp, and it seems like it's being used quite often. And we also stopped in at Osprey Creek South. And this was a kind of unique tree here. So we've got a cedar tree. I assume it's probably dead. That was hollow, and a new cedar tree was growing up in the middle of it. I thought that was pretty cool. And some quite nice pathways and that around the campsites, and good outhouses made of concrete, so they've lasted. And then it was time to head back for Grant Narrows. It was a long day. The sun was starting to set. And seeing golden ears from a different angle. Hey, now this was a trip that did this year to Raven Creek. So Raven Creek is the first campsite on the east side of the lake. I believe it's around the area to 5 to 7 kilometers up from Grant Narrows. And so our goal on this day was to scout out a possible trail to Raven Lake, which is up here. So this was just a proposed possible route for us. But our main goal was to go to a waterfall, which that's where the three is listed there. That's a waterfall. And where 2's listed on this map is where we were thinking about crossing the creek and going up towards Raven Lake. we only made it as far as the two on this map.
How long to walk to the lake?
Well, there's no trail.
Okay.
And different reports that I've seen, it's, people talk about 12 to 14 hours to get there. So I don't think it would take that long, but people carry big packs and pack rafts and things that have gone up to the lake. It's not visited very often.
Thank you.
I don't know very many people that have been to the lake, so, but it is it's been on my list for a long time to do. So just showing a satellite view of it, again, starting down here, Raven Lake's up there. These little marks in here, this is an old logging road that's very, very overgrown, and it comes up along here. So some people have walked that in the past and then cross the creek and go up to Raven Lake. But that little bit right, you can see right in there is put a dot there. That little area there is the falls. It's in a canyon. So again, Raven Creek was established in 1996 as a campsite. These are the old signs on the left from 1996, and now there's new signs going up with the First Nations logo. So this is just showing Raven Creek from a distance. So that's Golden Ears up on the right, and this is the Raven Creek beach and campsite area, and that little sort of line that you see going up through there. There's a ridge right here, and the canyon of Raven Creek is down in that section there. And you can see the more recent logging up here. Still a long time ago, but those are logging roads going up there. So the idea was to go up this ridge, cross over the creek somewhere, pass over this ridge, and then get into Raven Lake, which is back in here. And so on this trip, it was myself, Mark Haddock, and Jeff. So this is where we parked the boat this day, kept it out in the water, so that wasn't a problem. So that's looking north up the lake. And yeah, a couple of guys showing off their legs. And this was the beach. It was interesting when we got to the beach, somebody was pulling small logs off the beach. I'm not sure what they were going to use them for, but they were bundling them up. So that's what all those sort of scratch marks that you can see on the beach, they pulled small logs off from the area in the back. So to get to Raven Falls, you pretty much have to walk up the creek. None of us had been there before. We didn't know how far it was, but we had an idea. But it started out walking beside the creek, and then we went inland for a bit, and then we had to get into the creek because it got too much into a canyon. But the creek was low enough that we were able to rock hop. But the rock was beautiful and not slippery. Now we're starting to get into the canyon area. Maidenhair ferns growing on the side. And that was our first glimpse of the waterfall. A little bit closer up. And the water, the pool was just amazing. It was so deep that I was actually a little scared to go swimming in it, so I didn't go. But sort of kick myself now that I didn't go for a swim. But anyways, next time maybe. But yeah, very green color. There was even a little cave off to the side. And lots and lots and lots of maidenhair ferns. Great place to have lunch. Just relax and watch the water. And so it was a little bit difficult, but we climbed out of the canyon and tried to go up further to see where we could actually cross the creek. And just above that waterfall, there was another waterfall that wasn't as easy to get down to, but still a little waterfall coming down. And the forest was all at least second growth. If not, it might have been logged a couple of times. There was a lot of small trees that were down that made it a little bit difficult for walking. And eventually we got to a point where the canyon, there was a spot where we could actually get down to the water and try and cross it. So we got back down to the creek. It was beautiful. Mark just cooling himself down. And then Jeff, if you're listening, I think this was liverwort, if I'm correct. Do you
I
remember?
yeah, I think it might be.
Or if anybody else knows?
Yeah, do we have a botany expert here?
We've got
I'm not an
expert. Sorry.
I think I'm not an expert, but I think that is liverwort, yes,
Yeah.
of some kind.
We have
Yeah.
that in Pinnacle Creek, just up the street from my house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk later and find out where in Pinnacle. So this year there was some awesome fungus in Pinnacle Creek. So yeah, and I didn't look it up too much, but it's kind of interesting how it's sort of got these little hairy bits on the underside. And then I believe, Jeff, is this what they call dog's vomit or something?
Yeah, slime mold, dog's vomit.
It's yeah, mold. That's right.
Cool.
Say that again.
Cool.
Cool. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know what this. Do you know what this is, Jeff?
It might be dog's vomit as well, but just
Okay, it's
older.
dried up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And close up of a maidenhair fern. And this was kind of interesting too. Another maidenhair fern, but it's got some black dots on it. I thought it was interesting. And so another trip this year was mainly, well, actually on the day when we left, we didn't know where we were going. And we thought we might be going to Osprey on this particular day. That was myself, Mark, and Jeff. And we started boating up and we went to Dart Creek and we went to the petrographs, and then we bumped into a couple of people a couple that have a home on Pitt Lake, and we talked to them for quite a while, and they told us about Defrauder Falls and how we could get up to the top of Defrauder Falls. So that ended up being where we decided to go on this particular day. But so Dart Creek is here, and then the petrographs are kind of in this area here, and then Defrauder Creek is up here. Oh, and there's also a little mine shaft too that's in this area too.
Do the people who live at Defrauder Creek live there year round?
No, they have another home. So probably should have put this map in a little bit later, but this was our track of going up from Defrauder Falls. So Defrauder Falls are back here. We went up the south side of Defrauder and saw some beautiful pools and that up above, and then did kind of a loop up above. But we'll show some photos of that in a bit. So our first stop was at Dart Creek. Again, I'd never been to these campsites before. This sign here was in behind the old sign, so eventually I assume this sign will get put up. And again, one of the sort of concrete outhouses there, some big cedars close by. Really nice campsites. And you're right on the lake looking across at Golden Ears. Even saw a couple of loons come by while we were there.
Can I ask a dumb question, Ian?
I'll have a dumb answer for you.
So I'm always really intimidated by going and exploring places because I'm scared I'm going to get lost. But can you explain a little bit of how you map out your route and how you obviously have kept track of where you went by the red marks on the map, and just kind of give us a bit of an explanation how you navigate? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's some people, even in the city, some people just have um, I don't know, what do you say? Just something inside of them that they know where they're going, and other people don't. Some people know how to read a map, some people don't. I've just grown up kind of knowing more or less where I am. Um, but what has really helped is having a GPS. So is in learning how to use it. So that's been extremely helpful going into places where there aren't trails. But basically, I would tell somebody if you're not sure of yourself, don't go too far. A simple thing for me for Burke Mountain, I never had a good map for Burke Mountain when I started exploring it in the early 90s. And I would just go up so far one day and come back and then go a bit further the next day and then just keep on doing that until you kind of map out the whole area in your head. But now there's a great map for Burke Mountain.
Thank you.
Yeah. Talking about maps, that's what Jeff and Mark were doing. They were pulling out the maps and they were looking at, well, where should we go in that? And we were still trying to decide at this point where we were going to go. And then we stopped in at where there's the sort of a mine shaft. So it was quite interesting from a little ways on the lake. You'd never see it. It's quite hidden. There's ocean spray that's all around the opening. Very nice. Probably the most ocean spray I've ever seen in one place. It went up the hillside. And then so we were able to dock the boat and go inside. So that's mark ahead. It doesn't go in too deep. And that's Jeff investigating to the end.
What time period is this mine from?
I don't know for sure. I would be guessing probably, the 40s or 50s or something like that.
Oh, so fairly contemporary.
Yeah, it's a horizontal mine.
Uh,
And that's the end of it. So I'm guessing it's somewhere in the area of maybe 35 to 40 feet deep. So, 10 meters or so. And that's a view from the back end looking out.
Ian, do you have any idea what they would be looking for in that mine?
No. Jeff, any idea?
Interesting to do
No,
research.
no idea.
Yeah.
They obviously didn't find what they were looking for.
Or they found Slumax gold and they took off. So just looking out, you look right out at Golden Ears. And we talked about before the meeting started about arbutus. So that's an arbutus tree up on the top of the cliff there. This is on the west side of the lake. I'll have a picture later of one on the east side.
That's a long way inland.
Yeah, it's the furthest on the east side of Pitt Lake is the furthest inland arbutus grow. But Pitt Lake used to be a fjord, so it used to be the ocean at one time. So the petrographs are quite famous on Pitt Lake. I think some are quite old and some are more recent, as in 50 to 60 years ago.
A quick question on the pictograph scene. I
Yeah.
thought I saw some photographs where the level of the water was much closer.
Well, Pitt Lake is tidal.
Yeah, so I guess on the day that you were there. Okay.
Yeah, and there's petrograph. I'm only showing a fraction of what there is along the lake. So these are the ones that are the easiest to find.
Yep. When I went up there on a boat tour, the pictographs were much closer to the water.
Okay. Well, and here's one. So this is a petrograph right here. So that might be what you were thinking.
Yeah.
They will generally use overhangs, so it protects them. But what's also is the green. I'm not sure if it's lichen or not, but that's just absolutely stunning on the rocks as well.
That is so beautiful.
So you can see the petrographs over on the right side here. Now they're in the middle. Just a close up. From my understanding, this one here, they're not sure the date on it. They're not sure if this person is holding a gun or a sword. So they're not sure of the time period.
Do the KC have any stories about what the pictographs are supposed to be representing, what the stories they're telling?
I don't know about that. I know there was a document. I haven't read the whole thing. Talking about where all the petrographs are on the lake, but I haven't read the full document yet. And this one is just getting a little bit closer to it. So, but they kind of look like birds to me. So now we've got to the mouth of Defrauder. It's a quite popular place for people to stop. That's Mount Osprey in the background there. It's probably one of the best places to stop if you want to swim. There's industrial sort of equipment, either from mining or from logging, that's been left around. I'll show a picture of a steam donkey in a little bit. Yeah, also there's some mountains on the east side of Pitt Lake at different angles. It looks like a person that's looking up into the sky. And this is Defrauder Falls, as seen from low down. And so we were told to look for a trail on the south side of the falls. Mark had always investigated on the north side and never found anything. And then lucky enough, we bumped into these people, and it was great because it didn't look terribly promising at first. It was cliffs like this, and I looked up and I thought, how are we ever going to get up there? But we just sort of followed a bit of a track, and it took us up to a ledge that we were able to walk along quite easily and find our way up through the steepest sections. And then once we got to the top of the falls, it really flattened out. It was quite amazing. Even found a mining marker. I think, was it 72? Yeah, from 1972. Lots of salal up in the area. Not a wide trail by any means. It was just sort of a bit of a track. You can see, Laura, that this is my GPS that's hanging from my pack, and
Okay.
just it's tracking me as I go.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And so when we got up to the top, this area had all been logged, but it was unbelievably flat on top. And we kind of wandered around for a while. We found some different logging debris. We found lots of rattlesnake plantain. That's one plant that I don't see very often. For whatever reason, I'm finding more and more of it now. But all the trips that we did along Pitt Lake, we found lots of rattlesnake plantain. And we got fairly close to a grouse. And this was one of the pieces of some sort of logging debris. I'm not even sure what it was. And this was an oddity. This was a stump, and I looked at it. I wonder what that is. It was a piece of metal, like a metal bar that had been put on the tree somehow, and the tree had grown around it, and it was stuck in there. So we were told by the people that have cabins there that there was a beautiful pond up there, and lucky enough we were able to find it. Just a beautiful color. Would have been a great place to go for a swim. And some fairly big cedars up there as well. And another beautiful waterfall. Cedar on the left and waterfall on the right with another pool coming out of a crack in the rocks. And then that was, I guess we did a loop and we came back down all quite nicely. And then when we got back in the boat, we went up the lake a little bit because we were really interested in the roads that were around up top, and we wondered how they got up there. And we found out that that the roads come down on the north side of Defrauder. You'd hardly notice that it's a road once it hits the lake. But anyways, this is a steam donkey that's been left on the shore of Pitt Lake.
Quick question, Ian. What was the
Yep.
date you said of this again? What date?
The date of when the logging was, or
No, the date of when you did this trip.
oh, it was this year.
I mean, what time of year?
This trip was July.
Okay, I was just thinking about the clarity of the pictures, which are really good, and what the weather would be. Okay.
Yeah. So again, that's the picture of the mountain that looks like a person looking up into the sky. And this is just our return trip, looking at Golden Ears on the backside. Now we'll head into Osprey Creek. So Osprey was once again Mark, myself, and Jeff, and this was in July as well of this year. So Osprey Creek is at the far end of the map on the right-hand side. So this particular trip, we were looking for a viewpoint. So this is an old road. Jeff had been on it many times before, but hadn't been there for, what, 30 years, Jeff?
Yeah, actually, probably 35 years. Yeah, late
Right,
80s.
yeah. So Jeff had been in there before, but things change over 35 years. So I looked at some old satellite views to try and figure out where the old road was, and it was pretty accurate actually. So this was our track. So we left the boat down here, and we followed an old road up to kind of like this point where the number 5 is, and then we left the road and went looking for some viewpoints over where the number 2 is. And we found 2 viewpoints where the 2 and the 3 are. And then a little special feature where number 4 is that we'll show some pictures of. So again, boat trip up Pitt Lake, always incredible, the views looking up the lake. And there's an arbutus tree on the east side of the lake. Still looks pretty healthy. And that's looking up Debec Creek with one of the 5 fingers. And then we got to North Osprey Creek, which I had some pictures of it earlier. And we devised a system of being able to put the boat away from the shore and be able to pull it out and then pull it back. So that was great. It worked really well. And here we are getting ready to head off on our adventure. So Mark had spent some time here in '96, and he wanted to show us some depressions in the forest floor that he'd brought an expert in to see if they were some sort of like pits that were dug by First Nations and that. And I don't think they really came to a full conclusion of if it was something that was left behind from logging or if it was First Nations pits. And Jeff, was this
Bird's nest fungus.
There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, do you want to tell the story about the canoe that Mark found? Was that at Osprey?
I'm not sure about this story. Go ahead.
Oh, I can't remember exactly where it was, but they were doing some work. I think it was at Osprey, and one of their workers found what looked like the remains of an old dugout canoe. So
that's right. Yes. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. And so work stopped immediately until they could get an expert in to verify it. And if I remember correctly, the expert came in and said, "Well, that dates from the hippie days."
Yeah.
There
He said it was from 1960 or something like that. So yeah, it wasn't anything old.
Ian, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what we're looking at in this picture.
Oh, this is bird's nest fungus.
And what are the 2 little round things?
You mean these things here? those two things that is the bird's nest fungus. And we're also looking at Jeff's hand too, just
That
so you
bit I
know.
did gather.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff finds bird nest fungus all over the place. So, and if people aren't familiar with it, it's like little seeds that almost look like eggs that are inside of it sometimes. So we found the old road, and it was in not too bad a shape, and we walked up it. Further up, it got a little bit more overgrown, but then not too far up, too further up, we found some pretty old Douglas fir and cedar trees. So a decent size Douglas fir. And this isn't the best photo in the world, but this was a pretty big track. And it's like a deer track, but we were thinking it might be elk. So elk were reintroduced to the upper pit. So Osprey isn't that far from the upper pit. So never got it confirmed or anything, but it certainly kind of looked like that. Just a neat boulder along the road. More maidenhair ferns. Now we're off the road and heading towards hopefully a viewpoint. Old cedar that had been pecked away by a pileated woodpecker. And rattlesnake plantain that had a shoot coming out of it. So that not sure if that was the first time, but I certainly haven't seen that very often, but saw it a couple of times this year. And we found a viewpoint. So that was quite neat. Looking south. We were happy with that, but it was time to have lunch. So we all sitting down and having our lunch, and Jeff pulls out a package of big muffins to share with everybody, which that was very great of him. And so we decided to carry on a bit further. It was a lovely forest, some decent size Doug fir trees. And then we found another viewpoint. This one was spectacular, far more open, just a great view looking south down the lake. And that's Golden Ears off to the left with the snow on it. And down here, sort of hidden is where the Osprey Creek campsite is. The actual Osprey Creek comes out further along.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the viewpoint, dropped off a little bit. These guys were pretending they were scared from the drop off, but it wasn't that steep.
It's a great viewpoint. You could sell that one.
Yeah, well, we're hoping to have a trail in there one day if we can get permission. So we're calling it the White Pine Viewpoint because close by there's a western white pine. They're always great to find out there. They've got that scaly bark and the big
Sure,
cones.
that's not a Sitka spruce.
No, not with those cones.
Oh, the cones, yeah.
Yeah.
The bark sure looks like it.
And we found some coral roots as well. And then one of the real interesting things, we carried on just a little bit further, and we could see something down below that almost looked like a roof of a building or something. And so we got closer, and we weren't sure if it was a rock or what it was. But that was just the forest that we had to walk through. We ended up seeing a helicopter landing spot. And so we went down to have a look at it, and massive timbers. They cut trees down to make the pad, and all that we could figure is that this is outside of the park, and that it was that they're investigating possibly logging this area. So the area is about 130 feet wide, and they've got the helicopter landing spot. And I looked it up to see how big of an area a helicopter needed to land, and that was about exactly what it needed to land. So they cut all the trees down, built this for helicopter to land, and none of the trees around there have been logged. So hopefully it doesn't happen.
Pardon me, Ian, was that number 4 on your map? That's what you're
No,
referring to?
yes, that's the secret spot.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty heavy duty. And we found what I think are some wild raspberries there as well. And then on the way down, as Laura was talking about, how do you find your way? Well, we were walking on the road, and as we got closer and closer to the lake, the road became more and more overgrown, mainly with salmon berries that were super thick. And so I've got my GPS out, and I'm saying, yeah, we're on the road, but it's so overgrown, we decided to head off into the forest where it was more open. So if a trail does get put in here, we probably wouldn't come up the road. We would stay in the trees more. And so we got back to the lake, and we looked up, and this is probably about the area right here is where the viewpoint is. It's fairly open up there. And we were happy to see the boat. And then that was, we just had to make our trip back down the lake again. So I made 3 trips in the last 2 years to Debec Creek. So this one was in August of this year, and myself, Mark, and Jim DeGrand were on this trip. So just a refresher, we got Grant Narrows down here, so it's about 20 to 22 kilometers up to Debec Creek up here. So this is the mouth of Debec Creek where we left the boat. This picture, I look at this and it's kind of odd to me how it looks, because I'm trying to figure out where the water's going, but it's like a panorama view, so it's kind of bent a little bit. So down here is the head of the lake, and down here is the south end of the lake, or heading down. It is on a bit of a corner, but it's with the panorama, it just makes it wrap a little bit more. But it's a really, really cool photo. And that's simply just looking at the head of the lake from where we left the boat. So there's been quite a few people that have camped in this area. Somebody left a whole bunch of garbage. It looked like it was an old shelter that they tried to build there. We even found an old Coleman stove. A friend of mine collects these, so one day maybe we'll pull that out and clean up the area. So the bottom end of Debec Creek is quite flat. I remember going in there in the mid-90s and finding lots of places to camp. This was just a day trip, but the idea of this trip was that Mark had the idea of following Debec Creek up, because he had noticed a little trail there, and it was a really good way to go up Debec. So we didn't go up the road, which we would normally go up. So we followed the creek up. It was quite lovely. And one of the interesting things we found along the way is this. You'll see this blue thing here. It's a rope that somebody has dragged up there and left up there. And what I think it is I think it's somebody brought up a rope so they could put it down to the bottom of the falls so they could get down there. So we found the spot where you can see the double falls, very spectacular falls. I could see why someone wanted to get down to the bottom of it.
Great
And
photo.
then from there, it's a steep trip up to the logging road. So I mentioned it before about sometimes when I've gone down there, I've just seen the single fall. Another time I've seen the double. I finally figured out what it is when you leave the road at the top and head down, it actually splits into 2 ridges that go down towards the creek. And so it depends on which ridge you take to go down to the creek. You get a better view. If you take the ridge that goes down to the right, you get the double viewpoint, which is a little bit further away from the waterfall. So on the way up, Mark found a piece of logging debris of some kind. And then I just threw this photo in here just to show that I carry an inReach with me. So it's a satellite device that you can send text messages. So this is how we keep in touch with people when we're out of cell reception. So it's a great little feature to have out in the woods if you're spending time away from cell service. And we knew we had hit the road at the right place because this was the signs that I'd put up a couple of years before. So that was great to come out on the exact spot where we figured you should go down. And then we were walking up the road further because we wanted to try and go up as far as we can. And Mark had heard some water, and he thought, oh, there must be some waterfalls not too far from the road. So we headed over, and all of a sudden we saw this beautiful waterfall with a lovely pool. And the other thing that Mark had talked to me about a couple of years ago, he said, yeah, he says, I've heard of an old logging truck that fell off the road and went in the creek. He says, you ever heard of that? And I'd never heard of it before. I'd never seen it. Anyways, we found it. So it was right near where this waterfall was. I poked my head out of the bushes, and all of a sudden there was this logging debris that was in the creek.
It's a very unique looking waterfall.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'll just go back. It's extremely carved out. There's so much water force that comes through there. All the rock is smoothed off and that. So,
Ian, it brings back memories, the waterfall of Many Faces Falls.
oh, okay. Yeah.
The little way it curves into it.
Yeah. So we went down as close as we could. We climbed up on this rock. It wasn't that easy to get up to it, but it gave us a close view of the old logging debris there, or the logging truck. And that it's not too far from the top of that big double drop falls. So this is looking downstream, heading towards the double drop falls. And Mark wanted to get even a little bit closer, so he went over the edge a little bit to get some photos. And you can see the waterfall in the background. And so yeah, so it's broken into two pieces. We tried to find out what it was. Mark contacted sort of a historian forestry friend of his, and he came up with that it was probably an old logging truck that they converted into what he called a line horse, which had like a winch on it. So that's the winch part of it. And then that would have been the rims for the wheels and the differential and the drive shafts. I took this picture off the internet just thinking it might have been something that looked like this with the winches on the back of it. But on a next trip that I went up there, when we were in about the same spot on the old road, we found a spot where the road had actually sort of caved in. So what I figure is that there was probably the reason why the truck went into the water was there was this sort of cave in on the road. So this is the old road, still actually in pretty good condition, overgrown in places. And so once again, we made it up to the intersection to go up to the Woods and Valley. But on this day, we were going to head up the road further towards Spindle Creek. So we made it to Spindle Creek. Again, hadn't been there in over 20 years. There wasn't much water flowing down it, but just take note of how much water's in the creek here, because I went back a couple of months later and there was an awful lot more water coming down it. That's looking up Spindle Creek. And that's looking from Spindle Creek down to Debec Creek. And that's looking up Debec Creek. I was hoping to get down there and possibly look a ways up the valley to see there used to be a log that you could cross over on Debec Creek, but it was too far away to see. And that's looking down Debec Creek. Yeah, the forest is quite beautiful. This is the road on the way down. The last bit of the road before you get to the lake is washed out a bit, so it's better to get off the road. And we got back, the waves were a little bit, or the water was a little bit rough, but we had a little bit of trouble trying to get the boat going and get out, but we were able to do that. And when the winds are really high and the boat's going fast, this is what happens to your hat. So the last trip that we did, we're doing for time almost over. Okay, so good. So this was in late September, and this was going to be a 3-day trip, getting dropped off in Debec Creek, and then coming out into the Widgeon Valley. But I will just talk about the Debec Valley part of it. So yeah, so we got dropped off in on Debec Creek, except on this time we got dropped off on the north side of the creek, and we had to cross the creek, and I'll show some pictures of that. So we went up the old road up to where that Debec Valley sign, then we turned off and started heading up. Now, previously we'd only been up to about this point here, so the rest of it I hadn't been on in, well over 20 years. So it was a little difficult to find in some places, and other places it was still in great shape. But we ended up being able to find our way all the way through. But on day one, well, I guess on the first day we just got dropped off and crossed the creek and camped down at the bottom. And then the next day we went all the way to Spindle Creek, but we couldn't cross Spindle Creek. So we came back to this area here and camped. And then the next day we went up through here and into the Widgeon Valley, then camped, and then out the last day. So on this trip, we got a ride up Pitt Lake with Danny Garrett, who runs a fishing camp in the Upper Pitt. So bigger boat, but so you can't get into shore as easy. So this is after Danny's let us off at a friend's cabin's dock on the north side of Debec Creek. So he's heading off. He's got some customers on board that are going to be up in the Upper Pit doing fishing for 4 days. So he's gone. Now we're on our own to try and figure out how we're going to get back to the Widgeon Valley. So our first obstacle is getting across Debec Creek, and it was flowing way more than what I've ever seen it flow before. It had rained the previous 4 days, but I still didn't expect it to be that high. It appeared that it might have been a little bit shallower closer to the lake, but it could have been deeper in points too. We weren't sure exactly where to cross, so we ended up crossing back where that first photo was. So we made our way across here, and it got fairly deep at points. My friend Dean that was on this trip, it was just the two of us. He got up to his chest in water with the flow that was quite a bit of pressure on us. It was a good thing we had sticks, and we ended up making it across there safely. And a lot of our stuff was wet. We'd been wearing shorts and stuff, but I wasn't expecting to get my shirt wet crossing the creek, but that happened. So, but anyways, this was our campsite in the Debec Valley just before it starts going steeper uphill. We had a couple of water sources, one back here, and then the bigger creek a little further away. So this is what Spindle Creek looked like when we got to it on the next day. So, we could have crossed it, but we just thought it wasn't really worth it to go across. That we could do some other things instead. We were only going to go up another 600 meters or so up the creek anyways. So we decided to not cross Spindle Creek. And what we did instead was we did a little bit of work on the old road, clearing it out. This was a balloon that I found that I tied back up, used it as a marker for people to cross the creek. Also, we found some old logging debris, some pails and some jugs. So I put those up as markers as well. This is what the old road looks like. It's not in too bad a shape, but we did a little bit of snipping along the way. And then we got back to where the junction is, and that's where we decided we'd camp for the night. And this was our camp. And then the next day we're going to head off and try and get over into the Widgeon Valley. So along the way, there was a pretty nice pretty nice cedar tree. And then we got to the point that we'd been a couple of years before, so we knew it was pretty easy to get to there, but we didn't know what was ahead of us. And there was a few places that we had to drop our pack and look around for the old trail and that, but we ended up finding it. One section, there's a quite steep, rocky sort of area that we had to be very careful going up through that. But we made it up to, we call this Opera House Rock. Remember that from the 90s? And this is where we have to cross a little creek and then get into a more open area, and then eventually a helicopter logged area. That's all grown up now. So you might see there's Dean on the other side of the creek. And when I was up there last year with Sean, we found one of Doug Benny's old hiker sign that was on the ground. And so we were able to put it up. So it's always great when we can get some of those back up on the trees. And so last couple of photos here that when we got up a little bit higher, and from here you look right up Tibet Creek. So this is Tibet Creek heading towards the Bull Valley and then the Boise Valley. And the Five Fingers are up over in this area here, up in the top left. And a bit of a close-up. So as far as I can tell, these two peaks in here are known as what's known as the Boise Bumps. And then the peaks in behind are the Mount Gillespie area. So I'm not sure if this one is Mount Gillespie or Paulin Peak, but it's in that sort of general area. That was an area that I was in earlier this year as well. So the people to thank for the photos tonight, and people that joined me on these trips. It was a fabulous year, and look forward to more adventures next year. So if anybody has any questions, I'll just stop sharing here.
I'll just say it was excellent, Ian. That was really
great.
great.
Yeah, really awesome. Very inspiring.
Cool adventures.
Gorgeous area. Absolutely gorgeous.
Sorry, I'm just.
So Ian, do you get the impression that these trails are being used a lot by people who are canoeing and camping up the lake and so on?
Well, I wouldn't say that a lot of these places are being used right now. There was one area when we were in Osprey Creek. I found a Cliff Bar, and so not Cliff Bar, just the wrapper of it. And I thought, I just picked it up, and then I thought, there's probably a date on this, and there was a date on it, but I couldn't figure out by the order what was the year in that. But I think I ended up working it out that it was a Cliff Bar from I think it left here. Anyway, it's like 2005 or something like that. So it had been there for almost 20 years, this wrapper. So some of the spot. Sorry, what was that, Helene?
That's about how long Bruce will carry something like a Cliff Bar around his backpack.
That's true.
Yeah. So, the one thing I wish I would have had some photos of that, especially in the Quebec area, that on the logging roads are covered in moss, the old roads. And what there's these little pads, and it's from the bears walking, and the bears walk like in the same spot, and they create these little pads where when humans walk, they walk in different spots, and you create sort of like a long trail. So it's just showing that the bears have been using this a lot more than the humans have. And it's one thing I wish I would have taken a photo of it, but we saw it all over the place. And it's just one of those things when you see it all over the place, you don't think about taking a photograph of it. So I got to make sure when I'm back there again, I take a photo of it.
Are you suggesting the bears also eat Cliff Bars?
No.
Okay.
They do eat pails and things like that. So I was just looking at the chat, and it was just magnificent photos. So yeah, any other questions?
Have you gone up past the lake at all? I mean, I hear there's the hot springs up there, and there's some
Yeah.
places to see up there. Have you gone up there?
Yeah, I've been up like a couple times. BMN has camped and stayed at Danny Garrett's lodge, uh, Pitt River Lodge, and so at those two occasions we went to the falls, and I was there one other time as well. So the falls are about 22 kilometers up from the head of the lake. So people do canoe up and then take bikes with them and then ride their bikes up to the falls.
Mhm.
But I've hiked in from Squamish into the head of Pitt Lake a couple of times, and this year we could have done that, but we chose to hike in from Mamquam all the way into the Boise Valley to Cedar Spirit Grove, and then hiked back out through the Mamquam.
Ian, you saw some signs that there was elk, but did you ever see any elk?
Not no, and even in the upper pit, there's all kinds of tracks in the upper pit, but I never actually saw any. Some other people on our trip did see some, but
Cool.
but I don't think if you're in the upper pit, I don't think it's uncommon to see the elk up there now. They've done very well.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep. But we're hoping that they come down a little bit further. So
Do you have any scary moments with wind? I've heard that the lake can be quite treacherous.
the windiest day was when you saw my hat. That was the windiest that I've been on the lake in a smaller boat. And I said to Mark, that it's quite choppy and that, and he said, "Oh, it can get a lot worse than this." So he's been on the lake when it's been worse. I was in my own 12-foot aluminum boat, just going to Raven campsite probably 20 years ago, and the boat was fairly new to me, and it was before my wife was my wife. She was just a friend, and we were coming back, and the boat was, it was jumping over the waves and stuff. And I was a little scared, and Deanna looked back at me, thinking that this was fun kind of idea. But she said, "Are we okay?" I said, "We're okay right now, but if this gets any worse, it could get a little ugly." So, but yeah, Pitt Lake, it can get rough, and especially where we were, it's quite narrow. So when the boats pass by, they create waves, and the waves hit the rock cliffs and then bounce back. So you've got waves coming in from both directions. We were told by the cabin owners that we talked to that generally it gets rough in sort of like mid afternoon to later afternoon, and then it quiets down later in the day. So they would suggest that if you're heading back and it's rough, maybe just to wait an hour or two, because it might get smoother later in the day. But you don't want to leave it too late and come back in the dark either. But it's not a lake to underestimate. Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks everybody. I did almost bring it in time, only I guess 11 minutes late. Yeah, and so thank you very much for joining me on my adventures, and hopefully I'll have some more to share next year.
That's the only way I'll ever get to visit that area.
Oh, come on, Edie, we'll get you in a bigger boat.
This is beautiful pictures.
Yeah, it's just wonderful. Even just going up Pitt Lake, it's spectacular. So
Thanks for showing us that cool stuff, Ian.
yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for it all. Yes.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Beautiful photos.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it was a combination, right? So